Good morning everyone and welcome back to the Two-Headed Wolf Gaming channel and last Epoch as we're doing our third and final run for this series with the Sentinel as we're heading towards the Forge Guard Mastery. If you haven't watched my previous runs, what I'm planning today for the Sentinel is to go for a dual-wielding warrior and throwing skills. And what I'm hoping is that the damage from the dual wielding is going to add up to the throwing skills to such a level that will do this huge amount of damage. As far as defensive capabilities go, of course we'll be squishier, but I am planning to kite. Basically you're throwing attacks and as the enemy gets closer to you, you retreat and you start throwing attacks again and so on and so forth until they're dead, pretty much. And if we take a look at the key skills over here, we know that most of these attacks are about melee range and physical damage. We unlocked Hammer Throw at level 3 and I am going to use that for a while. I'm even going to show it off from the early game, but I'm not gonna fully invest into it. Later on in the game I do want to try out Javelin. I've never tried it so far and I'm very curious of how mastering this skill will look, how specializing in this skill will look. However, this is going to take a pretty long time because we unlocked this one at level 19 I think, something like that, so it's a long way away. But if we look at the Forge Guard Mastery here, things are starting to get a bit interesting. I'm not gonna read through them, we're gonna discover the skills in game, but if you take a look at the power scaling tags down at the bottom, you can see that they also have the minion tag there. And they scale up with physical and melee. So we are summoning some companions with us. They're weapons, like forged weapons and manifest armor. And this is going to help us with survivability. And I feel like for a character which uses throwing attacks, this is absolutely great. So we're gonna try this out. We also get shield throw, which I didn't expect. This one is a physical and throwing attack, and we're gonna use this definitely. I'm going to be replacing this one with, or I'm going to replace hammer throw with this one as soon as I can because it feels pretty good. And this one is a physical fire melee attack. I don't think we're gonna care about it at all. So I'll see you in game as we start using our hammer throw. And here we are within the game. I am now at level 7. I edited out the early portion of this run because we've already seen it. We've discovered everything that there is to be discovered about the early skills that the Sentinel has to offer in our Sentinel to Paladin run. Anything else was in a way covered by the Sentinel to Void Knight run, and at this point we are fully committed to editing out and just show anything that has to do with the build that we are going for. Anything that has to do with dual wielding, throwing skills, and the Forge Guard Mastery. So that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to start with equipment. I have 3 pieces of gear which I want to show off. There's 2 which are not super important. It's something that I just threw in my stash when I've done the previous runs. It's this helmet which provides us with +1 to shield throw, an ability that we'll only unlock when we pick up the Forge Guard Mastery, and we get also 9% increased throwing damage, which is going to help. Is this the best thing in the world? Of course not, but at least it has a bonus to throwing attacks. And then I have this amulet which gives us 15% increased throwing attack speed, and I feel like this is going to be super useful, plus another 18% increased physical damage, and I feel like this is going to help us, like these 2 bonuses together, is going to help us in the early game to speed up the process of leveling up. But then I have this Vortex Pennant, which sounds absolutely awesome. We get 70 health, free health gain on melee hit, not gonna do that too much. You throw an axe at a nearby enemy every second while channeling Warpath, so I am going to keep Warpath in the inventory here. 2% increased axe throw frequency per 10% increased physical damage. That sounds like such a weird combo. You have to stack up 10% increased physical damage. I don't know how much we can do that, but we're gonna try. +1 to Warpath, +1 to throwing attacks, which is perfect for us, and 71% increased physical damage while dual wielding. 71 increased physical damage while dual wielding. I feel like this is the perfect relic for us. And we need level 12 in order to equip it, but it's pretty awesome and we're gonna try it out. Now let's start with passives. One of the things which I would have loved to have is a stun to chance. I need more coffee. It's early in the morning. a chance to stun enemies because we are using throwing attacks. Stunning the enemies allows us to do multiple attacks on them before they even get to us. However, Overwhelm only provides us with melee stun chance, so Overwhelm is not going to be useful for us. We can either invest in Juggernaut, getting some extra strength and resistances, or we can invest in Fearless, getting vitality and health regeneration. I am thinking that I am going to kite out enemies more often than not, so health regeneration is not really something that I'm going to go for, and thus I believe at this point we're going to invest 5 points into Juggernaut, getting those resistances up and running very early on. 20% fire resistance for this early stage of the game is pretty good. On the other side, I just want to add up damage. I'm not going to go for either block effectiveness because we're going to dual wield at some point. Armor might be useful. Damage taken from nearby enemies. If everything goes right, we will not be nearby enemies at any point. Counterattack, once again, we have to be close by to enemies in order to throw a retribution attack at them. It's not my plan, and so getting increased damage is definitely something that I want, and stun avoidance will be very important for us. If we do not have a way to mitigate damage properly, getting stunned will be absolutely awful for us. It's going to allow the enemy get close and personal to us and probably kill us in the process. So we want to avoid any kind of stuns. As far as skill masteries go, at the moment I specialized here in hammer throw. Javelin is unlocked at level 18. Shield throw is unlocked at level 5 of the forge, at level 5, and we need to have the forge guard mastery. So we're gonna get shield throw a lot earlier than javelin, but we shall see how these work together later on. As far as hammer throw, you can do quite a few things with it. Like you can have the normal hammer throw that you can see here where you throw a hammer and it returns to you. You can change its properties to chain, for example. Basically, the hammer will not return to you anymore. You throw a hammer, once it hits an enemy, it jumps to the nearby enemy, to another nearby target. You can go in this direction with Iron Spiral, where the hammers will, the hammers that you throw will start spiraling out, basically surrounding you, sort of like a defensive shield, which can be pretty useful, or they can orbit around you. Now, this one is even more like a shield because they're going to protect you up to a point where I'm guessing they hit the enemy and at that moment they disappear, or something like that. There's one thing that I really like here is you can invest in these properties and then you can go here to Enra's technique where hammer throw can no longer spiral, chain, or orbit, but depending on which of the modifiers you have, you can look down at the bottom, it gives you a different bonus. So if you spiral, it gives you more hit damage. If they chain, they will deal more critical damage. If they orbit, then you get increased critical strike chance, which is an interesting way of investing in one part of the tree. And maybe the developers have looked at it and they said, hey, I don't feel like everything here is super valuable to fully invest. Well, why don't we make someone invest in a direction and then fully change their properties by going in the other direction and thus have pretty good skill there. There's this skill, Mana Start Forging. When you are out of mana, Hammer Throw is still free. And I feel like this is a skill that we want. The other thing that I want is for us to get over here because it's extra projectiles. And for the early leveling, I feel like this is going to be useful. So I have 3 points here. We're going to get Wing Hammers, increase projectile speed by 15%. I am going to go with Steadfast Path, where Hammer Throw hits have a chance to deal double damage, but hammers no longer return to us. That is totally fine. If we can kill enemies in one hit, that is more useful than actually having the hammer return. We get extra projectiles here, plus 2 per point, but mana cost also increases by 2. And that's it for the moment. So now we're gonna do 3 hammers per hit. If we take a look down at the bottom, we can see that the mana cost is not too bad. We can handle this. And we're doing pretty good damage at the moment. I have replaced the basic melee skill with hammer throws just to fully commit to this idea. And we're gonna spend a few minutes here just to just to show off the hammer throw. But then I'm going to cut out to a later date when there's something more interesting happening than just this. Probably a few levels in. What did we find here? Okay, a slightly better sash.
This way. You're here to help. Protect the drake. Tread carefully.
So far, I like the hammer throw. I think one of the main appeals that that this game has for me, is that skills are not set in stone. Like, you can modify them in so many ways. It actually feels cool to play sort of like the same build, right? Go, if you like, throwing skills. You can go multiple runs with throwing skills and pick different properties, and they will feel very different from one from another. Having spirals or orbits or just chain hammer throws, it will definitely feel very different in the way that you play the game and that a certain build feels to you. And I feel like that is such an amazing property. If we think about early Diablo or even late Diablo, there wasn't so much choice, I guess, or in a way, diversity.
Well, tell you what. Let's get out of here first, and then I'll explain more.
But then again, this game has evolved a lot, has taken a lot of the lessons that other ARPGs have brought in, and they've made it something special. Path of Exile also has, in a way, it has this sort of system where we can modify our skills in multiple ways by throwing in supporting skills. However, one of the downsides that Path of Exile has in comparison to this game, I'm not saying that it's a downside in general, like who would make that rule. But the downside in Path of Exile, or the difference, is that you need to find those support skill gems. And many times in the early game especially, you don't get those. You need to progress through the game, get to a point, get to the library, for example, where you get to buy all the skill gems or most of the skill gems from that ghost. It's at that point that you can really maximize your build with some of the modifiers that you have. And you also need to have the links for it, right? You need to have, say, 4, 5, 6 link in order to really increase the damage or really modify your skills. And getting a 4 link, it's easy. Getting a 5 link, it's not impossible. You will definitely get that sooner or later through the campaign. Getting a 6 link, well, that is a bit more problematic, right? Part of the journey, I guess, in Path of Exile is to get that 6 link, and maybe in a way that is the charm. You get like this huge power boost once you find the 6 link, or you craft the 6 link. However, in this game, you have freedom to pick these skills and respec into these skills all the time. And I feel like in a way it's a lot friendlier for new people to the genre, but I feel like it's fun to try out and play with, even for someone who has loved ARPGs for a very long time. We have a better axe here. Let's check it out. Warrior's Hatchet of Stillness, 0.07 base attack rate, increased stun chance, and some damage over time. We lose some melee damage and some physical damage. However, this might just be better. Let's see. 201, 196, and we get a 32% chance to stun there. Definitely going with this one. I said we wanted stun chances, and I feel like that is something that is going to work really well with us. Yeah, we are starting to stun enemies. Oh, this is going to be so good. Awesome. Multiple projectiles, stun chance on the enemies. Definitely something we want. As far as this point goes, we're gonna go with extra damage, and as far as specialization skill, what should we specialize in at this moment? Lunge? But I'm not gonna go close to enemies this often. Lunge final hit now immobilizes enemies for a short duration. You can now launch to other allies. Okay, holy incursion. There's some pilum throw. What is this? So we could go in this direction and get pilum assault. Lunge's final hit now causes you to use a javelin when using a spear. Causes you to use a javelin when using a spear. Improve lunges base critical strike chance when using a spear. Oh, okay, so this one is just focused around spear using. Very interesting, very interesting. Nothing that I didn't know about this before. We could throw in Rebuke as a defensive shield. Right? Whenever we get surrounded, we can use Rebuke here in order to clear the enemies around us. That might be useful. Was there anything else that caused us to do throwing attacks? I guess we could talk about this, the Iron Blade. But it feels like it's more of a summon rather than a throwing attack. And that leaves us to specialize in Warpath because we have that relic which might be important. But I'm not really going to use Warpath. That is the unfortunate reality of it, that we're not going to use this at all. So for now, let's just specialize in Rebuke. And we have 1 point here. You have increased health regeneration when channeling Rebuke. That might be useful in case of emergency. We could go with more duration to absorb the attacks. Rebuke hits deal more damage and Rebuke hits in a larger area. I do like that a lot. And you have increased mana regeneration while channeling Rebuke. Okay. Well, I don't want to go too far into this, but what I will do is go for retaliation and increase that hit damage and area so that when we throw Rebuke here, it's going to be a lot better. And I think that for the moment there's nothing much that I want to show off. I will return at level 12 when we re-equip this relic, and we're gonna try things out at that point. Here is a test for the absolute power that these hammer throws have. I've multiplied it 1 more time so that I have 5 projectiles at the moment, but look at that. I mean, compared to some of the other characters we've had, this one pretty much destroyed these two. And that's been pretty cool. Yeah, I just had to show this off. We are now far enough into the game where we can throw in this unique Sentinel relic, the Vortex Pennant. However, right now it's not at full strength. We're only gonna get +1 to throwing attacks for the moment. In order to get +1 to Warpath, we will need to specialize in Warpath. In order to increase the number of axes which you throw when you're channeling Warpath, you would need to apply the bonus of 2% increased axe throw frequency per 10% increased physical damage, which means that you would have to specialize your equipment in increasing the physical damage. But the relic provides us with 71% increased physical damage, but only when we are dual wielding. So in order to get this at full power, we would need to have throwing attacks, we would need to specialize in Warpath as well, and we would need to get dual wielding. And that's when we get the full power of this relic. It's gonna be a while until we get to that point. Dual wielding we get, I think, before or around the point where we can specialize in the foreguard. I think something like that. But we're gonna throw this in. As you can see, it's giving us an extra point there to throwing attacks. We're at level 6, and if we throw this in, we'll be at level 7. If you removed once you've invested the point, if you remove the relic, what happens is that the game removes one of your points automatically. When you get into the panel for the very first time, it shows it in red to show you that it has removed the point from that particular skill. So that's how that happens. For right now, I've invested in Force of Impact, increasing the hit damage, but also increasing the stun chance by another 25%. And I went with Overwhelm, where we do 30% more damage against stunned enemies and increase the stun duration there. For right now, one of the things that I was thinking is to go over here, to go to reducing the mana cost to 0. I could also reduce the mana cost here while getting some extra damage, but it feels like I'm starved for mana for a long time. So I am going in this direction. We're going to go with increased attack speed. Maybe I'm going to go with some armor shred as well because it's 20% and it could be very good for bosses. But either way, let's go forward. We're gonna spend the rest of the episode just playing with Hammer Throw. I believe that during the next episode, which as per usually starts at the end of time and we pick the Forge Guard Mastery, as soon as I return after farming, what I'm going to do is that we're probably gonna play around with the Shield Throw Mastery. And afterwards, in the final episode, I think I might just want to try and specialize into the Javelin. I think that's what I want to do, but we shall see. It really depends on a few things, but we will have to see how Hammer Throw feels, or how Shield Throw feels from the Forge Guard Mastery, and then we'll see. As you can see, I am running out of mana at this point. I am throwing 5 attacks at once, however, it's pretty difficult to maintain the mana pool up. And one thing that I've done is, whenever I've ran out of mana, if I am surrounded by enemies, I just go into Rebuke. That for a while allows us to regenerate the mana. As you can see, I have 100% health regeneration. I have some reduced elemental damage taken while we're channeling this. One of the things that you can do is get Protective Legacy, which allows these buffs here, the reduced elemental damage taken and the armor, whatever you have invested here, it allows you to keep those buffs for a bit longer after the channeling has been done. You can also go here where you can get a haste buff after you're done channeling. So you get haste, cast speed, and attack speed increased by 25% at the end of it, which stays on for a very short time, the half of the duration that you've done a rebuke, which is up to 2 seconds at the moment, but you can also increase the amount, where is it? Here. The duration on which you can channel, thus making this even more effective. And you can get this buff here, which allows you to increase the buffs that stay after channeling, so all these 3, which is pretty impressive as a way to go forward and buff it up. And I think that's what I'm going to do, but I was also thinking of throwing a point here into mana regeneration because it feels like Rebuke has become just a shield for me. I guess it's a shield for everyone else, but it's a shield for me where I am running out of mana, so at that point I am going into Rebuke to protect myself while mana is regenerating, and I'm thus getting that extra boost to mana is very important. Now let's see how multiple projectiles here can wreck these people, these students. And as you can see, our damage is quite big. We're not applying a lot of stuns to them. Well, we're really not applying much at all. But we don't really need it. When we have this area of effect and we can hit multiple enemies at once, I feel like that is quite valuable in itself. And right now I'm doing a bit of kiting, like I'm throwing axes, I'm avoiding damage, I'm throwing hammers, not axes. And we're doing pretty well. I like when they get themselves in a line because that allows us to maximum impact here. And I feel like this build for early on has cleared the enemy bosses the quickest. No questions asked. One of the main reasons is because I didn't have to avoid as many attacks. If you are in melee, it's definitely a bit more difficult to fight. You really need to move around a bit more as the enemies are doing all sorts of area of effect attacks or like these big rushing hits, which you have to avoid if you want to survive. And you do. We could get with this idol 12% chance to bleed on hit, increase physical damage and increase minion physical damage, which we might do once we pick up the Forge Guard Mastery. I have a critical strike chance at this moment because I felt it's a bit more useful. Let's go back to town. Let's push forward. As far as passive skill points go, I have invested a lot in damage. As you can see, we're maximizing Relentless here. And we have unlocked the next level of skills. And at this moment, I am not sure exactly what to invest in. Getting some health and mana per point, I think, is the right way to go. But it only applies to Rive, Vengeance, Smite, and Multi-Strike. So this is not gonna apply at all to Hammer Throw. We are gonna go dual wield, so Aegis of Renewal does not work for us. Retribution, I haven't invested into it at all. So I am thinking that I'll maximize Juggernaut. And afterwards, I am going to go with armor most likely until we get to the next level here where we can get Gladiator for dual wield and Axe Thrower, which gives us an 8% chance to throw an axe automatically, which sounds pretty good.
What?
Let's get our unique gloves here. There we go. Elemental damage leeches health. We don't do elemental damage, but we get 13% elemental resistance, and I feel like that is good.
What? Bah.
Or passives, as I said, Juggernaut is the way to go.
Companions, life, please. Stop
And the
it.
next point, once again, into Juggernaut.
Gods be with you. Stay safe.
I'm happy with the fact that I don't seem to have to read through these quests at all. But on the other side, why is there a multiple choice? I feel when anything you say, anything you choose from the dialogue does not improve it, does not change things around, then it doesn't really matter. It felt like the first time I played, it felt like there was a choice for whom to give the book that you find in order to get these unique gloves. There was another NPC which you could also talk to, but since one of these updates, either 1.1 or 1.2, that choice doesn't seem to be there anymore. And so I'm curious exactly what happened there.
Stand down or die.
Nice. This has been a really nice character to play with. For early on, for getting the extra damage, the hammer throw in itself is very powerful. I guess you could go with some of the other modifiers as well, and it might be just as fun. I have no idea for right now. But just keeping it with the basic hammer throw and just multiplying the amount of throws or amount of hammers that you throw out. The amount of projectiles is what I was thinking, but I couldn't find the word for it. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Good for clearing mobs. But it's at this point that I also feel that I'm starting to fall behind a bit in damage. You can see some of these enemies are slightly tankier. Thus they're a bit more dangerous as I'm running out of mana. I have to consume too much of mana pool to take them out. And thus they leave us or leave me in a precarious situation. It had to happen sooner or later. There's definitely always a drop-off in any kind of build that you do. I guess the only chance that you will not get a drop off is if you get some legendary equipment, some endgame equipment that you can craft and bring it forward to your new characters. It's only at that point that the drop off might not happen, just because you already have everything that you need, everything to multiply the amount of damage that you are doing. However, if you are not in that situation, if you're trying to do like this solo self-found and do builds from scratch, then many times you will find yourself in waves, in a roller coaster, right? Get super excited, super powerful, then you push further into the game, the modifiers are starting to catch up to you. You will do this. Nice, clear the enemies, gain some mana back. I guess I could even use it as a shield against these enemies, right? So somehow I feel like I'm going to keep Rebuke as a specialization, and I am going to focus it around buffs rather than damage. I believe that that is how I'm going to go forward. Let's go back in time. We need to get to the other side of this passage. And apparently it's only in the time of dinosaurs that we have a way there. What is the damage? 155. Should I do like this? Should I also be... I guess I could be playing with Shield Bash. I should use it a bit more often. What's the mana cost? 9? It's not that bad. I'm doing extra damage with Hammer Throw to stun enemies. So it might be useful to actually use it. There is an enemy here which I want to take out. Well, that was quick. I really thought that he'd put out a bigger fight. Maybe it's this one? Not even this one does that much. Iron Cuirass of Hope. Getting extra mana. Don't mind if I do. Feel like mana is a bit more important right now than armor. And I think that's about it for this episode. Hammer Throw is definitely an interesting skill. I really thought it would be more boring. This game has a lot of surprises. I think the basic skills and in themselves are not impressive. When you see them for the very first time, there's not really... it's like if you've played Diablo, if you played an ARPG before, these skills are not these like super unique things which you've never seen before. You don't know exactly what they're about. But the nice surprise is that these skills, the modifiers that you have to changing these skills and how quickly you can get to those modifiers is the real surprise. It's a really nice thing. They have a nice feel to them. You don't have to go out of your way to turn them into something very useful. You get a lot of bonuses for extra damage, and it feels like the developers have thought about everything before they decided to release the game, pretty much. They developed it through the early access in a very good way, in a very thoughtful way. They have considered the mechanics and their unique spin on each and every skill, both in the Sentinel, right, and the masteries that we've played with so far. And I would doubt the fact that it's going to change, that we are going to find a class that doesn't feel unique. At least for right now. We shall see. For now, that's going to be it for this episode. I'll be seeing you in the end of times as we're picking up the Forge Guard Mastery. Then I'll be farming around for some extra levels, and we'll return at the point where we can spend those points and have a lot of fun with it. Hope you have enjoyed it. See you in the next one.